The story I'm about to share with you is not one I ever imagined I would write. When I was a child, pretending notebooks full of my words were actually published best-selling novels, and practicing what I would say at my first book launch, I always thought it was fiction and fiction alone that I could create real impact with. I grew up enthralled by the possibility of stories, the promise of them, the protection. Reality was not what I was looking for when I'd curl up with a book or sit down with a bit of paper and a pen. I could escape into another world when I read and create one of my own when I wrote. It brought me comfort like nothing else. I've always been a deep thinker, some would say overthinker. And despite my love of fiction, I was transfixed by the real world too. I was fascinated particularly by life and by death. I thought about these things deeply from a very young age. I remember sometimes I would lie in bed at night, feeling my head start to hurt as all these powerful questions and worries built up with nowhere to go. At times I'd feel so separate, so detached from everyone else because I really believed that nobody could possibly be thinking the same way I was. These strong thoughts meant that I was a very anxious child. I was hyper aware of everything, taking in all I encountered and feeling its weight and its burden as my own. Although I undoubtedly had a wonderful, warm childhood, parts of it do feel clouded with memories of how afraid I so often was, and of so many things. When I was 14 years old, in school and preparing to start my first year of GCSEs, I began to mentally struggle in a way I had not experienced before. I still find it hard, even now, to properly explain how I was feeling and what I was going through at that time. The World Health Organization says that half of all mental health conditions start by 14 years old, but that most of these cases go undetected and untreated. That statistic hits home for me. I was 14 the first time I used self-harm as a coping mechanism, unbeknown to anyone around me. Self-harm would go on to become as much a part of my daily routine as brushing my teeth, except it was happening a lot more than twice a day. So quite suddenly, and without any obvious explanation, I found myself dealing with multiple complex mental health issues that I had no real understanding of. And at first, I told no one about it. I think part of the reasoning behind that was that what I really wanted was for someone to notice, without me having to tell them first. I didn't want to have to, as I saw it, own up to what I was going through, out of fear of dismissal or disbelief. I also couldn't bear to face up to it because by telling someone, I thought I would somehow be making it more real. So, desperate to keep my struggles to myself and under some kind of control, I frantically tried to find ways to cope with them, through things such as self-harm, self-medication, substance abuse, and disordered eating. I was buried so deep in my pain that I had no real idea what could be done about it. I don't think I believed that anything could be done. With much time, care and attention, this started to change, and I slowly began to feel more capable of opening up to people around me. Saying that in a single sentence makes it seem as if it was something easy or quick or straightforward. Let me assure you it was not. Parts of this process were probably some of the most excruciating experiences I've ever had, and in some ways I'm still having them. I'm still learning how to feel better, how to cope better, how to live better, and I'm not really even close yet. It's a long road, filled with kinds of pain I didn't know I had the capacity to feel, and made up of days I'm not sure I'll make it through. But in the middle of all that, I have learned that there will be unexpected little pockets of hope or pride or joy that will find their way to you as you take steps forward. The first time you open up to someone, for example. And for me, the first people I spoke to were my teachers. Having school as a safe place was really important for me at some of my lowest points, and certainly initially when those conversations were more difficult at home. The support I received from staff, both teaching and pastoral, was invaluable to me. They spent time sharing stories of their own, trusting me with the experiences of them and their loved ones to help me feel less isolated and less hopeless. They listened when I felt I could talk and talked when I could only listen. They took appropriate action when things started to feel much more serious, helping and encouraging me to reach out to people who could offer proper professional help. They started the conversations that needed to be had with my family and friends and supported me through this process as it was something that I found very difficult. They gave me places I knew I could always go, just to be however I needed to be in that moment. They made me laugh and made me smile, often when I had gone to them to cry. They helped me feel comfortable and safe, and most importantly, they helped me to know and truly believe that I was not alone. They weren't able to make my struggles go away. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as that, and kindness is not a cure. But because they took the time to care and took the time to ask, I was eventually able to be more open with my family, with my friends, and with all the doctors and therapists and psychiatrists I would have to deal with. All of that support combined, everything those different people did for me, saved my life. So 6 years on from that 14-year-old girl struggling on her own, and here we are. I am 20 years old. I am alive. In my second year of university, studying creative writing, a degree I love, not a year behind everyone else, as I'd branded myself when I was too unwell to start university at the same time as my friends. I write a blog where I talk openly about difficult topics, in the hope that one day it will not be so difficult anymore. I have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and anxiety, which feels like a relief and a burden all at once. I am able to have conversations about my mental health with my family and friends, and those relationships are stronger and more concrete than ever. I have become a young champion for time to change, giving me the opportunity to use my experiences to do good, as I truly hope I am doing by sharing my story with you today. And still, I continue to deal with the intensely difficult reality of my mental illness. I experience often overwhelming suicidal thoughts, urges and efforts to self-harm, severe depressive episodes and anxiety attacks, dissociation and detachment, amongst many other symptoms of my illnesses. Over the years, I have gone through school counselling, child and adolescent mental health services, private psychiatrists, several different therapists and therapies, various cocktails of medications, and a 2-week stay in a crisis house. Despite my best efforts, my mental illness hasn't just disappeared with time. And actually, I've stopped trying to make it. Instead, I want to learn how to cope with it in a manageable and realistic way. I would not be here, able to be talking about this right now, without the deeply caring, often messy, always genuine support from my family, my friends, and my teachers. This story, my story, doesn't have a lovely, neat ending. It's just the reality of my experience and where I'm at with it all right now, and that's always changing. Maybe bits of what I've talked about look like where some of you are at right now too, or where a friend, a family member, or someone else you know is. There is much to be said and much work to be done around mental health services in this country, and that's a whole other story. But the message I want to leave you with today is the power of what we can do for each other, as friends, family members, colleagues, teachers, students. When you are facing mental health problems, it can be all too easy to be tempted and tricked into isolation, as I was. And I know how impossible it can feel to resist that. But I also know that life is so much more than it seems to be in our darkest moments. So if or when those dark moments come, please be open to the idea of real help, in whatever form that might appear. An appointment, an admission, a prescription, or even a simple conversation. You are far from alone in whatever you are going through. As cliche as that sounds, and as hard as I know it can be to believe, it is one thing that will eternally be true. There is always someone in your corner. So, the story I never thought I would write. There it is. It's certainly not fictional, and it doesn't feel remotely comfortable or safe to me in the way that writing normally does. It's the truth, though. And I'm glad I get to be here to tell it. I'm glad I get to be here at all.